Linux is no longer just a niche operating system used by developers and hobbyists. It has quietly evolved into a powerful, flexible, and surprisingly user-friendly alternative that is now beginning to shake the very foundation of the traditional desktop computing world. And as whispers of Windows 12 continue to spread across the tech landscape, something unexpected is happening behind the scenes. A growing wave of users, from casual laptop owners to enterprise-level organizations, are starting to seriously consider leaving Windows behind and embracing Linux in numbers that have not been seen before, and this shift has sparked conversations, debates, and even reactions from some of the biggest names in technology, including Bill Gates himself, who has long been associated with the rise and dominance of Microsoft and Windows as the backbone of personal computing. The story begins with anticipation. Rumors about Windows 12 started circulating long before any official announcement, with leaks suggesting a heavy focus on AI integration, deeper cloud dependency, subscription-based features, and stricter hardware requirements. And while some users were excited about the potential innovations, others began to feel uneasy, especially those who were already frustrated with the direction Windows 10 and Windows 11 had taken, with frequent updates, telemetry concerns, and increasing system demands. And as these concerns grew, Linux distributions quietly stepped in to fill the gap, offering stability, performance, and control in a way that many users felt Windows had slowly drifted away from. Imagine a typical user, someone who has used Windows their entire life, suddenly hearing that their current PC might not fully support Windows 12, or that certain features will require constant internet connectivity or even a subscription. This creates a moment of hesitation, a pause where the user begins to explore alternatives, and this is where Linux enters the conversation, not as the intimidating command-line-only system it once was, but as a polished, modern experience with distributions like Ubuntu, Linux Mint, and Fedora, offering intuitive interfaces, app stores, and compatibility layers that make the transition far less daunting than it used to be. As more users experiment with Linux, they begin to discover something surprising. Their systems run faster. Even on older hardware, updates are less intrusive, and there is a sense of ownership and freedom that feels refreshing compared to the tightly controlled ecosystem of modern Windows, and this is where the migration starts to gain momentum. Not as a sudden mass exodus, but as a steady, organic movement driven by curiosity, frustration, and the desire for a better computing experience. Meanwhile, in the corporate world, IT departments are also paying attention. Rising licensing costs, security concerns, and the need for customization are pushing organizations to reconsider their reliance on proprietary systems. Linux, with its open-source nature and strong community support, becomes an attractive option, especially for servers, development environments, and even desktop deployments in certain industries. And as businesses begin to adopt Linux at scale, the ripple effect extends to employees, students, and everyday users who are exposed to the platform in their professional lives and begin to see its potential at home. And then comes the reaction, not in the form of a dramatic announcement or a public statement, but in subtle shifts, interviews, and commentary that reflect a growing awareness of the changing landscape. Bill Gates, a figure synonymous with the rise of Windows, has always maintained a pragmatic approach to technology, focusing on innovation and impact rather than blind loyalty to any single product. And while he is no longer directly involved in the day-to-day operations of Microsoft, his perspective still carries weight. And when he speaks about the future of computing, people listen. In various discussions, Gates has acknowledged the importance of open-source software and the role it plays in driving innovation. He has noted how collaboration and transparency can lead to faster advancements and more secure systems. And while he does not frame Linux as a direct threat, there is an underlying recognition that the landscape is evolving, that users now have more choices than ever before, and that the traditional dominance of Windows cannot be taken for granted. At the same time, Microsoft itself has undergone a transformation, embracing open source in ways that would have seemed unthinkable decades ago. From integrating the Windows subsystem for Linux to acquiring platforms like GitHub and supporting cross-platform development tools, the company is clearly aware of the growing influence of Linux and is adapting its strategy accordingly. But this also creates an interesting paradox, as Microsoft supports Linux in one context while promoting Windows as its flagship product in another, leading some users to question the long-term direction of the ecosystem. Back in the user community, the conversation continues to evolve. Forums, social media platforms, and tech channels are filled with discussions about switching to Linux, with users sharing their experiences, troubleshooting tips, and recommendations for newcomers, and this sense of community becomes a powerful driving force, making the transition feel less like a leap into the unknown and more like joining a movement, a collective shift toward a different philosophy of computing. One of the key factors fueling this migration is the rapid improvement of Linux compatibility with popular software and hardware. Tools like Proton have made it possible to run many Windows games on Linux with impressive performance, while applications like LibreOffice, GIMP, and Blender provide robust alternatives to their proprietary counterparts. And for those who still rely on specific Windows-only software, solutions like virtual machines and compatibility layers offer viable workarounds, reducing the barriers that once kept users locked into the Windows ecosystem. Another important aspect is privacy. In an era where data collection and tracking have become major concerns, Linux offers a level of transparency that is difficult to match. Users can see exactly what their system is doing, customize it to their preferences, and avoid the feeling of being constantly monitored. And this resonates strongly with a growing segment of the population that values digital autonomy and control over their personal information. As the narrative unfolds, it becomes clear that this is not just a technical shift, but a cultural one. A change in how people think about software, ownership, and the role of technology in their lives. Windows 12, with all its potential innovations, has inadvertently become a catalyst for this transformation, pushing users to reevaluate their choices and explore alternatives that they might have previously overlooked. And what makes this moment particularly interesting is that it is not defined by a single event or announcement, but by a series of small, interconnected developments that together create a larger trend. A slow but steady movement toward a more diverse and competitive ecosystem where no single platform holds absolute dominance. In this context, the reaction from figures like Bill Gates is less about resistance and more about acknowledgement, an understanding that the industry is evolving and that adaptability is key to staying relevant. And while Windows will undoubtedly continue to play a major role in the computing world, it is no longer the only option, and users are increasingly aware of that fact. As we look to the future, the question is not whether Linux will replace Windows entirely, but how the balance between these platforms will shift, how competition will drive innovation, and how users will benefit from having more choices than ever before. And in many ways, this is a positive development, a sign of a healthy, dynamic industry where progress is driven by diversity and collaboration rather than monopoly. The rise of Linux in response to Windows 12 is a story of evolution, not revolution, a gradual change that reflects the needs and priorities of modern users. And as this story continues to unfold, it will be fascinating to see how both platforms adapt, how new technologies shape the landscape, and how the next generation of users defines the future of computing. Because at the end of the day, this is not just about operating systems, it is about empowerment, about giving people the tools and the freedom to choose what works best for them. And in that sense, the growing interest in Linux is not a threat, but an opportunity, a chance to rethink the way we interact with technology and to build a more open, inclusive digital world where innovation thrives.